Hi everyone, my name is Ashley and welcome back to my kitchen. Today I'm going to make some homemade marinara sauce. My family loves marinara sauce, of course, in any Italian dish. Our family has really started to like this particular sauce that we can only get in certain stores. And it's a little pricey, so I've done some research. I found what I think might be a pretty good copycat, and I'm going to give it a try. I really hope this recipe turns out good because I'm actually double and a halving it. Which is not something that I usually do when I try a new recipe. So let's take a look at the ingredients and we'll get started. All right, here I've got all my supplies and ingredients laid out. Of course, a cutting board, some fresh basil, fresh oregano. I have peppercorns that I'm going to grind up in my mortar and pestle back there, some salt, and then the tomatoes, which of course are a Plum style tomato. Those have less juice in general, so they make a thicker product, whatever you're making. A little bit of onion, a little bit of garlic, olive oil, measuring spoons, and then my big saucepan. I love this pan so much. I hope I don't have to switch over to my big kettle, but I think this will be deep enough and it'll work just great. So the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and get my onions and garlic chopped up. In fact, I'm actually going to send the onion through the grater because I really want it to be fine pieces of onion. The garlic should be fine. I should be able to mince those very finely. And then we're going to go ahead and get those sauteing in some olive oil. Because I plan to put this through the grater, I'm actually going to keep this part on the root side because all of those layers of the onion are connected and then it won't just completely fall apart on me. These onions really have my eyes going. I don't know if you've come across this as well, but I sort of feel like almost however much of the onion juices tend to be on my fingers tends to be how much my eyes are reacting. So if my eyes are reacting, I quick try to rinse my hands off and it seems to stop my eyes dripping right away. And this recipe doesn't actually call for that much grated onion, but I did grab a pretty small one, so I think I might need a second. And all of these little scraps here, too, of course, you can keep and throw in broth. I'm going to be making some broth this weekend as well, and taking you through that, recording it for you. And this will not only add great color to the broth, but all of this little tiny scraps of onions that were not easy to grate are super easy to throw into broth. Okay, we've got our onion grated here, and there's definitely enough. We've got onion juice running all over the place. So I'm just going to clean this up by putting it in this bowl. That way when we do our garlic, we won't have onion juice everywhere. We do have garlic in the garden right now from last fall's planting. However, we don't have any that are still left for eating. When I cut garlic, I like to cut the base off of it. Sorry, that's super bright. And then it makes it super easy to just give it a pound and then it pops right out. But first removing that bottom part is key. I'm so curious to know if you make your own spaghetti sauce or marinara or any kind of classic Italian sauce. And if you do you use your garden tomatoes? Do you buy canned tomatoes? Do you have any special tips and tricks that you would want to share? I'm always seeking like a super good classic Italian sauce. And I've made some pretty good ones. I have an aunt who's Italian and she and her mom have this amazing recipe that I've sort of seen be prepared, but nothing that I've been able to replicate too well. This recipe actually has a lot of olive oil, which I think is a a pretty good indicator of one that we like. We've made lots of different kinds before, and the ones that tend to be pretty heavy on the olive oil are the ones that we really like. Now, this recipe calls for about 3 tablespoons of minced garlic. I think I'm going to call that good. Because we're doing a 2.5 recipe, and 2 tablespoons is equivalent to 1/8 of a cup. This is probably about 1/3 of a cup, this is about 1/3 of a cup, which should be right about where we want it. All right, let's get this olive oil in the pan. Pan turned on. I'm going to go for a medium heat. Unless I'm boiling something, I usually go about a little less than 2/3 of my max heat on my stove for most things. While my oil is heating up, I think I'm just going to get started on opening up my cans. Even though these cans are BPA free, I still like to can my own tomatoes. I just feel like I would rather not have any kind of lining on my cans, and of course glass does not. The lids do have a lining, however, that's not a big concern for me because food doesn't usually typically touch the lids of canning jars. Maybe if they're being, shaken or something like that. Okay, the oil is starting to get a little ripply, so I'm going to just get my onions and the garlic in there and get those started. That's a lot of oil, but it is a triple batch, so it does get dispersed quite a bit. Okay, I went ahead and I turned down the heat a little bit. Now I'm going to get the tomatoes crushed by hand, add those, and then it's just going to gently simmer for about 2 hours. It says just stir periodically about half an hour before it's done. I'm going to add the fresh basil and oregano. While I'm working on these tomatoes, I was just thinking we are probably going to be giving this sauce a try in some deep dish pizza. We have been on a big deep dish pizza kick lately, and I'm thinking this is the perfect way to test this recipe and see if it stacks up to the sauce that we've been using. What'll happen is I will let this cool down overnight in the fridge, and the flavor should change a bit. That cooling down process I often find is really important in bringing out a lot of good flavors in food. My grandma, when she used to cook, she used to spend hours cooking things that I don't spend hours cooking, and I'm sure that was part of why her food tasted so good. It might have cooled down a little bit and then gotten heated up after a little while. But let me know if you want me to share the deep dish recipe. It is incredibly basic. And if this sauce pans out the way I hope it does, then all you have to do is make the dough, get some cheese, use the sauce. Of course, unless you want other toppings. A lot of times we just go for a cheese pizza with a deep dish. All right, last bunch of tomatoes. It all fit beautifully. I'm going to clean up this counter mess and we'll give this a stir. Any kind of sauce or salsa, things that you can reduce a little bit from your garden tomatoes, you'd be surprised how quickly you can use up tomatoes that seem to be coming out of your ears. On one hand, you want to make sure you have enough garden produce, but on the other hand, sometimes you feel like you have too much and you're not sure what to do with it. Reducing tomatoes is a really good way to process a lot of them, but then once they're processed, they don't take as much space for storage. This sauce is a perfect example of that, as are oven roasted tomatoes, which are fabulous. That ground up so beautifully. Now the recipe does call for black pepper, and all I had was this mix, but I'm thinking it's not too big of a deal. It smells delicious. And then I thought, as long as I'm just kind of standing here waiting for it to get warm and start boiling, I would go ahead and chop up the fresh herbs, and then I'll stick them in a little container in the fridge until I'm ready to put them in about an hour and a half. Now another thing, if you watched my seed video, you would know how much I love basil. It is one of my favorite herbs in addition to dill. This just smells so good. I could just eat it fresh on pretty much anything. Now this recipe doesn't rely on herbs too much. It actually only has maybe like 10 basil leaves and right around a teaspoon of fresh chopped oregano, which for how many tomatoes we added doesn't really seem like that much. So the flavors are really coming mostly from the tomatoes, olive oil, onion, garlic, and then just sort of supported a little bit by this oregano and basil. One thing that I really like about this sauce that we've been on to for a while, and this copycat recipe as well, is there's no sugar added. A lot of sauces have added sugar, which can help add a little bit of flavor depth. And I definitely add sugar in small amounts to certain things when I'm cooking, but if I can find something that is delicious without it, I love it. Now that we got this simmering, I'm going to check back in a little bit once we get some reducing. The sauce is thickening up so nicely here, and we've just been going about long enough, about an hour and a half, to now add the herbs. And from there, we will continue to let it go for about another 30 minutes. And then we put about half of it in the Vitamix at a time and blend it into a puree, then mix everything together and we're ready to go. The consensus is that it absolutely tastes like the sauce that we love and adore. So I got 4 pints out of that big recipe and then a little bit extra that we'll use, and I'll take a picture of our deep dish pizza. This sauce is perfect on our pizza and a fantastic go-to bulk cooking recipe. If you found this video useful, please give it a thumbs up, and we've got more scratch cooking videos coming. If you want to make sure to catch these, click on the subscribe button. Thanks and have a great day.